Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
I've had a long discussion about this. One on two screens. Actually, is the microphone on now? Yeah? Okay. I tend to talk really loud, and I'm not used to having a microphone, so let me know if I'm yelling. I guess one screen is good enough. So apologies to those of you who have already heard this talk, because I gave it at the networking workshop that we did for Jawad earlier this week. And also apologies to Michelle Pfeiffer, because this talk definitely does not pass the test that Tim said, that we should be aiming these new Friday talks to be such that that Michelle would enjoy them. She would not enjoy this. This is one of the old-style technical talks, I'm afraid. So sorry, Michelle. So this is the ZCast project is kind of an interesting project, because unlike most projects that happen from MSR, I think in this case it's us that have the 10-foot view, and the product groups and the corporate side of the company that has the 10,000-foot view, because this project was actually motivated by a joint sort of effort between LCA and the eHome group. So I'll explain that a bit further, but if I give you what the 10-foot view is, so that you just know what the project is from sort of our point of view. In a nutshell, it's about datacasting to the Media Center PC and the Pocket PC, and which is essentially doing file transfer and live streaming over digital video and digital audio. DVB is the UK standard, in fact the sort of European standard that you get your Freeview TV on. DAB, digital audio broadcast, is the digital audio standard that those pure digital radios use. But they have a component that can be used to send data, and we're taking advantage of that. I'll talk a bit more about what datacasting actually is a bit later. Now, we're actually doing this on a fairly large scale. We're partnering with a whole bunch of people that I'll tell you about in a second. But we've actually set up DAB and DVB transmitters that will cover all of Cambridge, in fact. And in fact, some of you are probably some of these 10 households. But we basically have about 10 households from MSRC that are taking part in this trial. They're going to have Media Center PCs, and we'll have sort of occasional access to these DAB-enabled PDAs to essentially try out the applications that we're going to try to build on top of this datacasting architecture. And once again, I'll talk more about what that will be, but we'll be sending things like movies, additional TV programming, possibly Windows Update and stuff over the airwaves, as it were. And now there is actually a research component to this, which some of you might have been wondering about, which we're kind of piggybacking onto the fact that we have this quite big infrastructure that we can just play with. And there's two sides to the research that we want to do. On the networking side, and Pablo is actually leading this, we want to just characterize these live datacasting networks, because this, on the sort of DVB and DAB datacasting, hasn't really been exercised very much in the wild, as it were. And we have this Cambridge-wide trial, so we can sort of run around, drive around Cambridge, characterize what the actual behavior of these networks looks like, and then think of ways that we can improve them. So that's one side of it. The other side is HCI issues in the more general area of sort of multimedia in the home, multimedia on the go. And because we have this sort of captive group of 10 households, we're going to take advantage of that and do as much sort of HCI, ethnography, and possibly lab studies as well, to just further push the boundaries on the types of on the types of applications which we might want to build in that space. So that's the 10-foot view coming from our side. So MSR has this sort of, not sort of narrow view, but the kind of bottom-up view. Now, this project was actually motivated by some quite lofty sort of corporate goals. One of which is that datacasting gives you a direct channel from the free-to-air broadcasters to Windows-powered machines. Right? So this bypasses the network operators, it bypasses the cable companies, and this is something which the free-to-air broadcasters want, because they don't like being locked into that, and it's something we want because we don't like being locked into that. And in fact, the sort of partnerships between the network operators and the consumer electronics companies is essentially shutting Microsoft out of a lot of this business, and this may be a way sort of back into it. And as a sort of side benefit of that, because we're actually working with these guys, that will help us push to get access to extra spectrum in this space, which we can use. And so, yeah, this, once again, the reason that this is important is that there are other companies and other standards that are really pushing hard in the space already. And they're essentially trying to shut us out, and we want to get into it. So there's this thing called MHP, which is the Multimedia Home Platform, which is a very Java, Linux-centric sort of approach to this kind of thing. There's something called DVB-H, which is essentially a mobile version of DVB that Nokia and Philips are pushing. And our DAB work sort of contrasts that. Another sort of 10,000-foot motivation is that LCA in Europe were challenged by Bill G to come up with some big ideas to be more Euro-friendly. And there are, as you probably know, there are legal reasons why this is a good idea at the moment. And so it turns out that this whole sort of ZCast infrastructure can play into the space of a lot of things which European governments want to see. So e-government, e-learning, addressing the digital divide, all these things, you can make a real case for being able to shove large volumes of data over the sort of TV airwaves that everybody has. You can make lots of good stories in this area. And so there's actually talk amongst the LCA people that the next phase of this project, we might really ramp this up and build a sort of European-wide DAB network to push these ideas further and really sort of address these issues. Yeah? Yes, it does. I'll get to that later, but yes. I mean, the thing is, most of the time, we tend to think of applications where there will, we tend to think of situations where there will be some kind of back channel, a GPRS back channel, or in the home, usually some kind of internet back channel. But you're right that so datacasting as it stands is simply a one-way thing. That's true, but I'll actually get onto that in a second. And as part of this European policy thing too, there's this idea that this might be a sort of European incarnation of the seamless computing vision that Bill has these days. And the group that does the portable media center, we're talking to them, or rather the LCA folks are sort of talking to them, and we might think about doing a sort of DAB enhanced version of that as part of this whole thing. So that's the kind of high level view, on the DVB side, we're talking about 15 megabits per second usable, and on the DAB side, about a tenth of that, about 1.5 megabits or so. So it's a relatively high bandwidth. Right? I mean, it's and a lot. I'll get to the applications that we're thinking of doing, given those bandwidths later. But I mean, what was your concern? You could, and I will get to that in a second as well. But yes, that's one of the common arguments against this. So we'll actually come to that. I just want to talk a little bit about the partners that are involved in this, because that's one of the interesting things about this project is there are lots and lots of different people involved in this. Within Microsoft, we have eHome, LCA, us, Pierre de Vries's group, the WinCE group, the Auto PC group, DMD. In fact, I didn't put up MED, the sort of MED division. There's tons of people that are either directly involved or that we're talking to, and that may get involved. So this is it's been quite interesting from the point of view of just getting a really wide view of sort of across the company. There are lots of people involved in this. There are also lots of external partners. The main external partner is NTL, because they're the ones who have actually put up the towers for us in Milton to cover Cambridge with DVB and DAB signals. But we're partnering with a bunch of content providers as well, Carleton and Granada, and a couple of other quite big content people that we're not supposed to name, but one of them is Disney. And DMD Secure do DRM software, digital rights management software. That's a very key part of this as well, because all of the content providers, as you know from sort of Napster on down, are very concerned about this in terms of not letting their intellectual property rights go. So DMD Secure, I think Microsoft has some interest in that company, but we're also partnering with them. And there's a bunch of other people that do DAB stuff. Ford, because we're actually going to get a sort of media-enabled Ford Galaxy to use as part of the Cambridge trial. The World DAB Forum, we're getting involved with various other people. So it's a wide-ranging. There are wide-ranging partnerships inside and outside. And once again, the LCA folk think this is a good idea in terms of just having a basis for some wider-ranging European relationship building, which is something that the corporate people are very interested in. Right. So that's the kind of scene setting at the low level for MSR, scene setting at the high level for why this project got started. Datacasting, as you probably all know actually, is essentially sending data over one way, as Mark pointed out, over existing broadcast networks. So, and this is pretty much any kind of broadcasting network. So this can be done over cable, digital or analog, et cetera, et cetera. And if you want to think about this, it's essentially very high bandwidth teletext or a very high bandwidth version of SPOT, right, which uses the same general kind of technology. The applications you can do are actually quite different when you get up into these much higher bandwidths. Now, it's much lower cost from the provider's point of view on a per shared megabyte basis. If you have lots of people that want the same content, if you think of, say, sending out the top 20 movies from last month or something, it's much lower cost to do this than to use sort of existing internet connectivity, which is what Thomas was asking. It's very easy to deploy. There's very little infrastructure that you need except for a tower every now and again, and then slightly different hardware in the home. It's independent of existing conditional access mechanisms, which plays into the space of not being shut out by the current pairings between consumer electronics companies and network operators. And then, yeah, it's a one-way high bandwidth pipe, usually with various back channel options, right? So we'll come to that when we look at the hardware which we're using. And this is actually being tried now. Disney in the US has this service called Movie Beam, where you basically buy this box and put it on your TV, and it comes with 100 movies installed, and then new movies show up automatically without you having to hook the box up to sort of anything. It's got a little antenna on it. And it uses Datacast, which is another datacasting company's technology over analog TV. So there's already some commercial interest in this in the US. Yeah, so here's a slide talking to what the question was asked. I mean, you could certainly do, there isn't anything that you can do over datacasting that you couldn't, in theory, do using any sort of internet connectivity, but it's mainly a cost and scaling issue. If you have a large volume of data that you want to send to hundreds of thousands of people, the same data, you very quickly saturate most sort of networks. And I know that there's the multicast argument, but you know, talking to most people, you talk to sort of John Crowcroft, and he thinks it's going to be a long time coming. So, and the same applies to the mobile space, where 3G isn't rolling out nearly as fast as people thought it would. And even when it does, there's still no way that you're going to be able to get the same volume of data over 3G channels that you could over, say, a DAB datacasting network. And here are some sort of samples of the costs. These, you know, these are costs that are presumably, I don't know exactly what sort of period these were amortized over or whatever, but the most interesting sort of numbers, I think, are in the mobile space, where you see that if you want to send 100,000 users the same content on a per megabit basis, it's much, much cheaper to do it datacasting over DAB than it would be to do it using 3G. And I think the other reason that I think that those numbers are sort of important is that the argument, it's harder to keep up the argument that datacasting is a good idea in the case of a fixed endpoint like a media center PC, because the sort of internet arguments may eventually win out. But in the mobile case, I think there is a very good case that datacasting may be a long-term stopgap. So, yeah. Oh yes, yes, that's right. Because you could, I mean, as I said earlier, you can do datacasting over say satellite or cable or whatever. So that's, yes, I meant cable modem when I said that. Yeah. Right. So turning to the actual trial here in Cambridge, this is a very sort of naughty diagram about what we're actually doing. But basically the content providers that we're partnering with are going to be shoving content into this system, which is going to be encoded using Windows Media 9, and then either sent out in as part of a datacasting service on DVB or DAB. And initially, the DVB datacast will be received by media center PCs in people's homes that are taking part in this trial, and the DAB signals will be received either by these pocket PCs we have, which have been DAB enabled, and I'll talk a bit more about them later, or by this car that we're going to be getting that's going to have a media suite in it and a DAB receiver. There was talk about incorporating the wireless mesh people under Pierre de Vries had talked about getting involved in this and doing some work sort of around with using the mesh to redistribute content after the fact, but that I believe has been postponed for the time being. And if I show you a more detailed diagram, I won't give you a test on this afterwards or anything, but this is just to show you. This is in fact, this diagram came from NTL. So this is because, as I said, NTL are the people that are actually building the infrastructure for this on the broadcast side. And basically, this is just to show you that, for instance, on the DAB side, which is in this lower box, Capital Radio is one of the people that are actually providing 5.1 sound, which can also be datacast over the to Windows Media 9 boxes. And it goes through, basically most of this happens in NTL Broadcast headquarters in Croydon, where all of the encoding gets done. And it actually gets shipped over their landline network to the transmitter in Milton. And then it gets sent out for the media center receivers and the DAB receivers that we have sort of around Cambridge. And we're not looking too much at the lines between the content providers and NTL, but we're interested in most of what comes afterwards. So yeah, that was I guess the point there was that was the server side. That sort of last slide was sort of everything that NTL is doing to get content on the air for us. And we have access to that infrastructure in terms of putting our own content in when we want to do experiments. And then on the client side, we have these three different things which we're doing. So we're putting media center PCs into people's homes, and they're going to get both Freeview TV and ZCast content over the airwaves. The exact model of the media center PC we're going to put in, we have yet to determine. When I first advertised this trial, this was back in, I guess I first advertised it in October or something. People really wanted to sign up because it meant that they got a media center PC. Now, of course, that Flexi deal came out just after that, so it really kind of toned down the interest in in people taking part in the trial, which was a little bit of a disadvantage. But there you go. It can be integrated in sort of any number of ways. I mean, it's essentially just an IP stream coming in, and it can either be live media streaming, or it can be files being transferred, or it can be websites being sent. It's pretty much up to us to put any kind of data that we want in that channel. So it certainly isn't just, it doesn't just show up on the no, that's right. And we're actually working with the Media Center SDK to actually build it into the Media Center shell, as it were. So that what will happen is there'll be this extra thing called the ZCast Spotlight, I think, that's just like the online Spotlight, which is already part of the Media Center framework. And that will have a sort of 10-foot UI to all of your Zcasting content, whether it's audio or video or whatever else that it might be. That's the idea. We don't have quite so much flexibility on the mobile side, because what we have is we have 3 iPack sleeves that have both a GPRS and a DAB receiver in them. But when we first looked into this, because pretty much everybody thinks that the mobile side of datacasting and the DAB side is more interesting both from a research point of view and from a business model point of view. So we thought that we'd have a choice of DAB-enabled PDAs that we could choose from, but that's not the case. There was only one company in the whole world building a DAB interface to an existing mobile PC, and we got the last 3 of them. So we had, now there are certainly companies that have these things in the pipeline, but they tend to be keeping them secret. Nokia is building in their case, DVB-H sort of handheld, but they certainly haven't released that yet. So this is actually quite interesting, though, because it does mean that we can play around in this area sort of early on, as it were. So it's good that we did get the last 3. And then, as I said, Ford, who are also partnering in this, are actually going to give us a Ford Galaxy that has an Auto PC and a DAB receiver in it. So you'll probably see Pablo driving around Cambridge in this Ford Galaxy doing network measurements. That's one of the ideas. Yeah, exactly. ZCast. That's right. Now the eHome people see this primarily as a way to enhance the media center PC experience. And so things like, the idea is that sort of in the background, this high bandwidth one-way channel will be used to gradually trickle feed, say, the top 10 movies to your hard drive. And then you would just be, when you went to this ZCast Online Spotlight, it would say, you know, the following movies are now available for you to buy. These movies will be here in an hour. These will be here in sort of 7 hours, right? That would be one idea of this. You can also just have store and forward of various types of paid content, whether it's goals or whatever else it is. On the mobile side, we've been talking to the people that the WinCE guys who did Sync and Go, and they're quite interested in this, to basically turn it around and make it a kind of go and sync, whereby rather than having to sort of dock your PDA and get it synced and then go in your car or go camping or whatever you do with it, it would just be able to be sort of updated all the time on the fly, wherever you are. And this is one of the things about datacasting, because these radio networks tend to have national coverage. You know, you get this very, very wide coverage, you know, essentially for free, which is one of the things which is quite appealing about datacasting. There's also a separate trial going on in London to send 5.1 audio encoded in the datacasting channel of DAB and then decoded using Windows Media on the either handheld PC or fixed PC. And so we're actually working along with them as well. It also turns out that we only found out quite a bit after the fact that one of the guys, one of the DMD product guys working on that 5.1 trial is based in this building. I had actually been emailing him quite a bit before I realized that he was just across the hall from me. Sort of one of the things about having a larger building than we need is we get these pockets of people that we're not expecting. Something else that it can be used for is not having to have any dial-up access to get automatic EPG downloads. In fact, this was probably the first idea that they had that it would be used for. So EPG is electronic program guide. So basically the kind of the list of programs that are on, so that the PVR can then record the shows that you want. And of course there's advertising and interactive TV models as well. Right, so this is all, why are we getting involved in this, right? Getting back to what research we want to do. On the networking side, the first thing, as I said, is just to actually see how these networks behave in the wild and figure out interesting things that we can do to make them better. So this is a couple of, these graphs are based on Pablo, I don't know if Pablo's here, but Pablo walking around the building. Because at the moment, because of a small regulatory snag, the Cambridge-wide DAB transmitter is not actually operating yet. But we actually have a DAB transmitter in a cupboard upstairs. So we have building-wide DAB coverage at the moment. And this is Pablo walking around the building, seeing how that coverage varied as he moved or didn't move in various parts of the building. And the idea will be to do these sorts of measurements sort of across Cambridge in a rigorous fashion, and then work out what sort of buffering levels and FEC formats we need to improve that behavior. There's also the idea of varying the type of error protection that you use depending on the application level data that is involved. DAB already does this for audio frames, but the idea is to bump this up to the application level and improve performance by having this sort of varied FEC based on the actual application that is active at the time. And Pablo can actually tell you lots more about these in the pub or whatever if you want to. Because Pablo is actually the one who's leading this side of the work. This, I think, is probably one of the most interesting things, is the data carouseling schemes. Because any of these datacasting systems essentially have this large carousel of data that you just basically you have to wait through. So if there's a bit of data that you want and you've just missed it, you have to wait for the next time that it comes around, sort of like the pages on teletext. Yeah. But there are interesting things you can do by having multiple channels and sending out, say, sending out exactly the same data segmented into different size chunks on each channel, and using FEC. FEC is forward error correction, which basically lets you reconstruct a stream of packets from a subset of the packets that have come in the last n packets, let's say. And you can do very clever things by combining segmentation with these FEC schemes to minimize the amount of time that you have to wait to get a packet that you've missed. And Pablo is looking at this now, and there'll probably be some patents in this area, which is another push on this project that's coming from the one of the things that Rick said when we told him about it is that what he would like to see more than anything out of this is a bunch of good patents in this space because of the corporate environment that I told you about before. And then talking about Mark's point here, another area of research that we want to look at here is how to combine this sort of flooding one-way channel with a back channel of some sorts. And you can actually look at protocol design in this area. And Pablo's looking at that as well. And in fact, this actually ties in very nicely with his work on the commuter router, which you may have heard about earlier this week. So this is actually a nice segue for him from that to this. And on the HCI side, I've only given this one slide and the networking 3 because this talk was originally for Jawad. But the HCI research is also quite important here. The first thing we're doing is this so-called ethnographic baseline, which is basically just, I mean, some of you have already done this, I think, for us, is going into these households, getting them to give us a sort of video tour of how they currently use whatever media that they have. This is supplemented by sketches and questionnaires. And we have a contract ethnographer who's then going to go in and do interviews based on this documentation. And then we'll be using that as a baseline to see how people's behavior evolves with various ZCast scenarios. There's the mobile side as well, so doing the same kind of thing in the mobile space, and essentially looking at how people might use what are essentially broadband spot applications. You have, if you suddenly have 1.5 megabits rather than 26 kilobits, what can we do in that space? A very important one are HCI issues in digital rights management, because the content providers all really want DRM. Users tend to really not want DRM, and so there's a big gulf there. And there's some work already being done in this area, but we think that we can push the envelope on that one. And then applications which actually cross these two domains. For example, browsing electronic program guides simultaneously on a handheld device and your media center PC, how that might work. And then the DAB side of this trial, which, and if it morphs into a sort of DVBH platform as well, would be a very good springboard to use for the wider Ubicomp theme that we're generally looking at in my side of the house. So that's a sort of longer term goal, as it were. And then just to say that there's quite a lot of work to build on here. A lot of theoretical HCI work, but also some stuff from Microsoft product groups. It's sort of interesting that some of the key background work that we have looked at has come out of the Microsoft usability people. And they're actually quite interested in this as well, so we'll be working with them as well. Yet another partner in this. So I'm good. I'm well under time. This is the last slide. So just to say where we are in the trial and where we want to go. So the Cambridge-wide DVB-T signal is now live. NTL has got that going, and there's some test content going out over it now. On the DAB side, as I said, we only have our local transmitter working because there's a slight regulatory snag which is being looked at now before we can get the Cambridge-wide DAB going. We've identified the 10 households, some of whom are here, and we've got this initial, oops, I misspelled that, initial ethnography underway. We've started to mock up and in fact implement some of these ZCast online spotlight applications that I talked about. And we've got a notebook media center PC, which you will have seen at the tab demo, which is now being set up so that Pablo can do some of his mobile networking tests. And so next is to actually get the media center PCs into the trial households, which it says end Jan, and it's probably early Feb now, actually, I imagine. To get the first round of these Datacast-enabled media center PCs, or to get the Datacast-enabled version of the media center operating system onto those trial machines, and then get the first rev of the applications in there and start monitoring people's use of them. To get the Cambridge-wide DAB signal live, and then start on the mobile experiments. And then there's carrying on doing revs of the media center applications, the HCI research, and Pablo's networking research. And that's it.
So there are only like 30 digital TV channels, right?
Yes.
So we're taking one of them?
No, we're using each. Because basically there are several so-called multiplexes, and you get between 4 and 6 channels on each multiplex. We have an entirely separate multiplex all to ourselves. So, well, we are via NTL. We basically paid NTL to do this for us. In fact, that's actually quite a good point, because that's where the bulk of the money that Microsoft put into this trial has actually gone. In fact, yeah, Lynn. It's really just that at the moment there are many more people that don't have satellite antennas, that already have. It was sort of like when On Digital came out. You actually could have made the same argument sort of against them, and actually I suppose they did go bust. But in any case, I was an early On Digital customer. All you had to do was buy the box, hook it up to your existing antenna, and it just worked. So I think that's a sort of small aspect of the advantages of this. But you're right in a sense that it's. I think that it's only in the mobile case where there's a long-term argument for this, and I think people in this project are gradually coming to that realization as well. In fact, which is why the sort of DMD guys and the MED guys are getting more and more interested in it. Mark, did you have a question? No. Anybody else?